I wasn't planning on stopping that night. I was driving from Phoenix to Salt Lake City after spending 4 days helping my uncle move into a new house. It was one of those trips where you convince yourself you can handle another few hours on the road even though your body is telling you otherwise. Around 11 that night, I realized I had started missing highway signs because I kept zoning out for a few seconds at a time. I rolled the windows down, turned the music up, even stopped for coffee, but nothing helped. About 20 miles later, I noticed an old motel sign sitting just off the highway. It wasn't part of a chain, and honestly, it looked like the kind of place I'd normally avoid, but at that point, I cared more about sleeping than anything else. The parking lot wasn't empty. There were 4 cars parked outside different rooms, which made me feel a little better. Inside the office, an older woman checked me in without saying much. She handed me a brass key instead of a key card and pointed toward room 7. Just before I walked out, she said, "If someone knocks tonight, don't answer unless you know exactly who's outside." I laughed because I assumed she was talking about drunk guests. But she didn't smile back. She simply wished me a good night and went back to reading the newspaper on the counter. The room was surprisingly clean. It smelled like fresh laundry. The heater worked perfectly, and after taking a quick shower, I fell asleep almost immediately. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but the room was completely dark except for the red numbers on the alarm clock. It read 1:18 a.m. At first, I thought I had imagined the sound, but then I heard it again. 3 slow knocks on the door. They weren't loud or aggressive, just 3 evenly spaced knocks. I stayed in bed, expecting whoever it was to realize they had the wrong room. About 30 seconds later, I heard footsteps walking away. They stopped outside the next room, followed by 3 more knocks. Then another set of footsteps. Then another 3 knocks farther down the building. I figured someone had too much to drink and was looking for the wrong room. I rolled over and tried going back to sleep. A few minutes later, the knocking returned. This time, it was outside my room again. Same pattern. 3 knocks, silence, no voice, no explanation. I sat up and looked through the peephole. The walkway outside was completely empty. There wasn't anyone standing at my door or walking away. The parking lot lights were on, and I could clearly see the entire front of the building. Nobody was there. I convinced myself I had simply missed whoever knocked, so I went back to bed. About 10 minutes later, I heard something else. A car door slammed outside. I pulled the curtain aside just enough to look into the parking lot. Every car I had seen earlier was gone. Mine was the only vehicle left. That confused me because there was no way I could have slept through 4 different cars starting up and leaving. While I was staring outside, movement caught my eye across the parking lot. The curtain in room 3 slowly moved as if someone had pulled it aside from inside. I waited, expecting to see someone looking back at me, but nothing happened. The curtain simply fell back into place. The next morning, I packed my things and walked to the office. The woman behind the counter asked if I had slept well. I mentioned the knocking, assuming she'd apologize for another guest causing problems. Instead, she looked at me for a few seconds before asking, "Did you open the door?" When I told her I hadn't, she quietly nodded and said, "Good." I asked who had been outside, but she ignored the question and handed me my receipt. About half an hour later, I stopped at a small diner for breakfast. The waitress noticed the motel receipt sitting beside my coffee and casually asked if I had stayed there the night before. When I said yes, she looked genuinely confused. She called another employee over and asked him if he'd ever heard of the place. He looked at the receipt for a moment before saying, "That motel's been closed for years." I laughed because I assumed they were joking, but neither of them smiled. According to them, the building had been abandoned after a fire damaged several rooms. The owner died not long afterward, and the property had been sitting empty ever since. I drove back that afternoon because I wanted to prove they were wrong. The highway exit was exactly where I remembered it. The gravel road was still there, but at the end of it, there wasn't a motel. There was an empty concrete foundation surrounded by weeds and a rusted sign lying on its side. I got out of my truck and walked around for nearly 10 minutes, trying to make sense of it. There was no office, no parking lot, no room 7. Just broken concrete and pieces of old brick scattered through the grass. The strangest part happened after I got home. While unpacking my bag, I reached into my jacket pocket and found the brass key the woman had given me. The plastic tag still read, Room 7. There wasn't any motel left for that key to belong to, but I still have it. Every few months, usually when I can't sleep, I take it out of the drawer just to remind myself that the night actually happened. I still can't explain where I stayed, or who kept knocking on my door after 1 in the morning. I travel for work a few times every month, and after enough years on the road, you develop little habits. I never book expensive hotels if I'm only staying one night. As long as the room is clean, the door locks properly, and the parking lot doesn't look completely abandoned, I'm happy. That's exactly why I pulled into a small roadside motel outside of Ely, Nevada during a drive back from Northern California. It was a little after 10 at night when I arrived. The place looked old, but not neglected. A single row of rooms faced the parking lot, and only one pickup truck was parked near the office. I assumed the motel was nearly empty. The man at the front desk barely spoke. He handed me a key to room 14, circled the Wi-Fi password on a business card, and said the office would be closed until 7 in the morning. That was it. No small talk. No strange warning. Nothing. My room was at the far end of the building. The first thing I noticed was how quiet everything was. There wasn't a television playing in another room. No voices, no footsteps. Even the highway seemed farther away than it actually was. After taking a shower, I ordered food through a delivery app. The driver called 20 minutes later, saying he couldn't find the motel entrance. I walked outside to wave him in, but the road was completely empty. He apologized and said his GPS showed my location in the middle of an empty field. I canceled the order and figured the app was just confused because of the remote location. I locked the door, turned off the lights, and fell asleep. Sometime during the night, I woke up because I heard someone rolling luggage outside. Not dragging it, rolling it. The sound moved slowly past my room, plastic wheels bouncing over old concrete. It continued toward the office before fading. Away. I checked my phone. 2:41 a.m. I remember thinking it was strange because I hadn't seen anyone check in after me. The next morning I packed my things and walked to the office. The same man was standing behind the counter. Before I could even say good morning, he looked at me and asked, "Did your guests leave?" I laughed. "I didn't have any guests." He frowned. "The people in room 11 complained about the talking outside your room around 3. I stared at him. I was asleep. He looked genuinely confused. They specifically said they heard at least 2 people having a conversation outside your door. There wasn't anybody. He didn't argue. He simply apologized for the misunderstanding and handed me my receipt. As I walked back toward my truck, something bothered me. Room 11. I hadn't seen anyone staying there. In fact, I hadn't seen anyone staying anywhere. Before leaving, I slowly drove once around the parking lot. Every curtain was open. Every room was empty. Beds neatly made. No luggage, no cars, nothing. The only occupied room the entire night had been mine. Or at least, that's what it looked like. I stopped at a gas station about 15 minutes away and mentioned the conversation to the cashier. He immediately asked which motel I meant. When I told him, he nodded. Then he said something that stayed with me. "You're not the first person who's mentioned hearing people that were never there." He explained that truck drivers occasionally stopped there because it was cheap. Every few months, someone would come in talking about hearing conversations outside their room or seeing lights turn on in empty rooms. Nobody ever reported seeing a person, only hearing them. I asked if something had happened there. He shrugged. "No idea." A few weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I searched online for reviews. Most were completely normal. Clean room, friendly owner, quiet location. Then I found one review from almost 6 years earlier. It was only one sentence. "If they tell you another guest complained about you, leave immediately." No explanation, no details, just that. I checked the reviewer's profile. It was the only review they'd ever posted. I still don't know what it meant, but I've stayed in dozens of roadside motels since then. Every single time I check in now, I count the parked cars before going to sleep. Because if I ever wake up in the morning and someone tells me another guest complained about me, when I know I was the only person there, I'm getting back in my truck without asking another question. I travel alone almost every week for work, so staying in cheap roadside motels has become pretty normal for me. I don't really care if the place looks old as long as it's clean, and I can lock the door. Last November, I was driving through eastern Oregon after inspecting a construction site. Heavy rain had slowed traffic for hours, and by the time I realized how tired I was, every major hotel along the interstate was either full or another hour away. The GPS eventually led me to a small, independently owned motel just outside of town with fewer than 1,000 people. It wasn't anything special. 12 rooms, 1 office, and a gravel parking lot surrounded by pine trees. Exactly the kind of place you'd forget about 5 minutes after leaving. The woman working the front desk apologized because she only had 1 room left. She mentioned it was a double room with 2 queen beds. That was fine with me. I was staying one night. She handed me the key, told me checkout was at 10, and reminded me that housekeeping started early in the morning. Nothing about the conversation seemed unusual. The room looked clean. 2 identical beds sat against opposite walls, with a small nightstand between them. I tossed my overnight bag onto the bed closest to the bathroom, turned on the TV for background noise while I answered a few emails, then showered and went to sleep. I never touched the second bed. I didn't even set anything on it. I woke up once around 3 because I heard what sounded like springs creaking somewhere in the room. At first, I assumed it was coming from my own mattress as I rolled over. The sound happened again a few seconds later. It wasn't loud, just a slow, soft creak, like someone sitting down on an old bed. I opened my eyes, looked across the room, and couldn't see anything except darkness. I listened for another minute before deciding it was probably the building settling from the cold weather outside. I rolled over and eventually fell back asleep. The next morning, I packed my bag, dropped the key off at the office, and got back on the road. About 30 minutes later, my phone rang. It was the motel. The woman sounded polite, almost embarrassed. "Sir, you left one of the beds completely unmade." I laughed because I thought she meant the bed I'd slept in. "No, I only used one." There was a long pause. "Yes, that's what I'm calling about." I frowned. "I don't understand. The bed you slept in is exactly as you described, but the other bed looks like someone spent the night in it." I honestly thought she was joking. "I was alone." "I know." Another pause. "We just wanted to make sure you weren't traveling with someone who accidentally left something behind." I told her again that nobody else had been with me. She apologized and ended the call. Honestly, I forgot about it within a day, until my company sent me back through the same area almost 6 months later. I booked a room somewhere else this time. While eating dinner at a diner, I mentioned the strange phone call to the waitress. Before I even finished the story, an older man sitting 2 stools away looked over and asked, "Did they tell you it was the second bed?" I said yes. He nodded once. "They've been saying that for years." He explained that truck drivers passing through town occasionally mentioned getting similar calls after checking out. Always the second bed. Always someone traveling alone. Nobody ever reported seeing another person. Nobody ever reported hearing voices. Just the sound of old mattress springs sometime during the night. I asked if he believed it. He shrugged. "I think old buildings make strange noises." Then he finished his coffee and quietly added, "But I also think it's strange that housekeeping always knows which bed you actually slept in." That sentence stayed with me. Later that evening, I searched online for photos of the motel. Most of them showed the same double rooms, 2 beds, same layout, same furniture. Then I noticed something in one guest photo. The photographer had accidentally captured the reflection of the room in the bathroom mirror. One bed had rumpled blankets. The other looked untouched. But there was a clear, body-shaped depression in the center of the untouched mattress. No luggage, no person, just the unmistakable shape of someone lying there. I zoomed in until the picture became blurry. It could have been the mattress. It could have been the lighting. That's what I told myself. Then I checked the upload date. It had been posted almost 3 years before I stayed there. I've slept in hundreds of hotel rooms since. Then, Whenever I get a room with 2 beds now, I leave the second one exactly the way I found it. And every single morning before I check out, I look at it one last time, just to make sure it still looks untouched.